Hi, this is a presentation of DHCP for IPv4 and it's a part of my CCNA2 class. The DHCP protocol is something that we use to assign IP addresses on the network. It is something that helps us so that we don't need to configure all the clients statically. So it's a protocol that will be a time-saving tool for the administrators of the network. DHCP is a short abbreviation for Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, and it will be used to assign IP addresses over the network, but also other kinds of network configuration information. For instance, the DNS server, the default gateway, the domains, and other things we need when we set up the clients for the network. It normally gives us a lease period, which means that we have the IP addresses. If I got an IP addresses assigned to me, I will have them for a certain amount of time. The time that I will have, or the lease time, can be will typically be short if I don't have enough IP addresses. For instance, if I'm a internet service provider where I have a certain amount of IP addresses to assign and I have more clients that wants these IP addresses, then I'll shorten my lease time. If I, for instance, on a local area network where I have enough IP addresses, my lease time will be higher. Because it doesn't make sense that they have to, renegotiate the lease again. So what happens when I have a client that is set up to get an IP address automatically? When it assigns or it will be connected to the network, it will send out a DHCP discover. And this is a broadcast to all devices on the network saying, I would like to have an IP address, please. Then the server will send back an offer to the client saying, I'm the DHCP server, here's an IP address for you. This is sent as a unicast because the server can see where this information originates. Then the client will send back the broadcast, well, I would like to accept this one. And then the server will send back a unicast saying, that's fine, you have it now. And then when the lease time has gone halfway, then the client will send if it wants to keep the IP address, it will send back, I would like to renew my lease. And then the server will acknowledge that if that is okay. So this is how the format of the IP version, the DHCP for IPv4 looks like. So it has the IP addresses that's given, it has the IP address of the server, the gateway, the MAC address, the server name, and other options that are available. And if you look into it here, this is when the client sends out the discover, where we can see that the destination MAC address here is Alt F, which means that this is a broadcast. So it will send out and ask for an IP address. We can see that a DHCP uses UDP and it uses port number 67 for DHCP. And the offer that get back from the server uses port number 68. So 67 and 68 are the port numbers used by DHCP. And we can see here also that when we send the offer back from the server to the client, it is sent as the unicast because we know the MAC address of the client, since this is the client that sent us the discover packet. So how to configure it on the routers? Well, what we need to do is that we need to set up a DHCP pool, which means that this is the pool of addresses that we can assign to clients. So we go in to config mode and say IP DHCP LAN pool. This is just a name, and then the network that we would like to assign IP addresses from. When we do this, we assign all the networks to be assigned automatically. And this is not a good idea because normally we would like our networking devices, our servers, our printers to have static IP addresses. And that is why we need to exclude these IP addresses to our DHCP pool. So then we use the command ipdhcp excluded address. And we can either do it on a single address, or we can do it as the first line shows here when we have a range of IP addresses. And then we will set up what kind of a default gateway we like. That is the default router command. This is the default gateway, the DNS server, the domain name, for instance. And then that is actually set up. When we have done this, the IP or the DHCP server will be running on our router. We can use the no service DHCP to turn it off again if we don't want it to run. To verify it, we can use, of course, the show running config. We can use the show IP DHCP bindings to see what kind of IP address leases that we have made already. You will see the MAC address and the DHCP address, the IP address that it has, the client has got. And you can also use the show IP DHCP server statistics. When you go to the computer, the Windows computers, you can use the ipconfig/all command. Then you will also see that this is a DHCP enable address. You will see the address that you have got. You will see the default gateway. You can see the lease for how long you will obtain this IP address. You will see the domain address if you assign that one as well, and you will see the IP address of the DHCP server. The problem is if we have a lot of different segments on our network. For instance, if I have made a lot of different VLANs which have their own IP segment, and I want to hand out IP addresses on all these different segments. One option is, of course, to place an DHCP server on each of the segments, but that will just administering that will be a bad idea. So instead, I would like to have one DHCP server that hand out IP addresses to all my segments. And to make that work, I need to set up in my router something called a DHCP relay agent. This is something that you put on your router so that it will catch all the DHCP offers that are on another interface where you don't have your DHCP server. In this case here, you will see that the DHCP server is placed on G01.1. And I would like this DHCP server also to hand out IP addresses on G0.1. So what I do is that I tell my G0.1 interface that it should catch all the DHCP offers that are sent out, or not the offers, the discover messages that are sent out on this interface, catch them and send them on to the other G0.1 interface, and then send them to the DHCP server that will answer back and send the offer back to the client. And by doing so, we are using something called the IP helper address. So this here is something I put on my G00 interface. I say that here I have an IP helper address, and it will catch the DHCP messages that are sent and send them on to 192.168.11.6. And if I do a show IP interface G00, I will see that I have the IP helper set up. So the IP helper is the DHCP relay agent that I've set up in this router. I can, of course, also set up my interfaces on the router to obtain an IP address automatically. In this case, I just use the IP address DHCP command. That will tell my interface to get an IP address from a DHCP server. And if I do the command show IP interface G01, for instance, then I will see the IP address that I've obtained from my DHCP server. It also says here that the address is determined by DHCP. So the routers themselves can also be a client. Typically, if you at home have an wireless router, this will also typically obtain an address from your internet service provider. So here it says that this is a automatic configured DHCP address on your internet interface. So unless you have paid for a static IP address. So what can go wrong when you set up the DHCP? Of course, you need to find out that you don't have any address conflict, that you exclude all the addresses that you have given statically in your network. Of course, that you have physical connectivity. You can test that your connection is working with the static IP address before you set it up to be dynamic. Of course, that you have the correct VLANs and the correct switch port setup and stuff like that. Yeah, and here, but the show running config, you can go in and look into the interface where you have set it up. For instance, here with a helper address. Yeah, of course, if we implement some kind of ACL like we talked about last time, we need to open up for the 2 ports that handles DHCP, which is 67 and 68. So in this case here, we use the the access list 100 permit UDP because it uses UDP, and say that whenever it comes in and out of port number 67 and 68, we will allow. So this is important to open it, otherwise it will not work. Yeah, and that was everything about DHCP for IP version 4. Thank you.